Alright, so let's talk about Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon. Recently, Awakened Realms, the Polish indie studio behind Tainted Grail, reached out to me to get a hands-on look of their upcoming 0.9 update for Tainted Grail. Now, if you haven't been following this game, this is their upcoming single-player dark fantasy RPG. Yes, dark fantasy RPG, I know we don't hear that often, if ever these days, which seems to be poised to be releasing sometime later this year. I hear they're targeting somewhere around summer, but regardless, this is their 0.9 update that has added a plethora of new content to the game, overhaul some systems, and for my current playtime, which is about 17 hours give or take, seems to be shaping up to be probably one of the best RPG or classic RPG game releasing in 2025. Now, as I said, they're a small studio. You may not have heard about the game, but I'm going to be breaking down the game, give you a better idea of what to expect in the 0.9 update. So yeah, let's talk about that. So as I said a moment ago, this is a single player dark fantasy RPG game. Personally, for me, this reminds me pretty heavily of the Elder Scrolls, Oblivion, Skyrim phase, in the fact that it is a pure RPG fantasy that doesn't necessarily hold your hand like we see in a lot of the modern RPG games. Now, what are some of the changes you should expect to see in the 0.9 update? First off, and just at the very beginning, there is a full-fledged character customization that seemed to have some pretty drastic improvements compared to previous updates. By no stretch of the imagination is it the most immaculate character customization, but there is some good options here, and I'm expecting probably in the future updates, when we get closer to the 1.0 update, there's going to be some solid changes and improvements to make the system a lot better. We also seen the prologue, which tells a pretty solid story. I mean, we kind of have a good idea of the story because it does involve King Arthur and Avalon, so you probably will have a general idea of what's going on in the story if you're familiar with the lore of Camelot and things of the sort. But this seems to have a darker spin on the story. It's definitely more fleshed out compared to the prior update before 0.9. The prologue runs anywhere between about an hour to 2 hours, depending on if you skip cutscenes and things of the sort, and it just gives you a better understanding of what's going on with the story, with some very solid storytelling, good music, good voice acting, just overall impressive stuff for an indie studio. Now, this is a classic RPG and you're able to choose your backstory, which contributes to giving you stat bonuses, but not necessarily defining you as a character. You're going to see a lot more character defining stuff as you progress your skill tree, explore the world, and just find things that actually shape your character. But it does have a very basic breakdown of giving you a little bit of an archetype to build around. Again, the character customization and the progression is pretty in-depth. We're going to have a whole dedicated section specifically to that. But there is a few other things I want to talk about first, and that is the combat improvement. I've been following Wolfhard FPS. You guys probably are very familiar with him. He covers RPG games, and he's been covering this game pretty drastically over the past couple of months that I've seen so far, and the combat improvements have been pretty insane. I personally opted to play a spellcaster focus in this playthrough because, again, I've been watching a lot of the more melee focus and they've been improving it drastically. But from personal experience, from the first time of actually playing this game, the 0.9 update is actually fleshing this part of the game out significantly. And with the 1.0 update, I'm expecting the combat to be just like a chef's kiss, near perfect. Now, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because I'm starting to talk about the skill tree and the passive, and I kind of want to say that for later. But I do want to talk about the active gameplay loop because this is my first time hands-on actually playing the game myself. So I want to make sure you guys actually have a better understanding of what the game is like. Now, as I said, this feels like a darker version of Elder Scrolls Skyrim. I know a lot of games and fans of the RPG genre like to say that, but this is the feels that I had when I actively started playing the game. Now, what I mean by this, as you probably know, I've been covering a lot of RPG games here on the channel. Recently we covered Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 as well as Avowed, and while those games are good for what they do, one of the complaints you hear me say a lot of is they feel a little on the rails. Everything is kind of pointed out to you. There's a big beam of legendary light coming off of everything. Everything is kind of handed to you to some degree. You kind of know exactly what's happening. In this game, it's not like that at all. It's more of the classic RPG Skyrim. Let the player explore and understand what's going on in the world themselves at their own pace. Of course, there are some things where Obviously they're going to give you their quest line, some basic quests, but they don't have a huge exclamation mark over their head. Not everything's explained to you, and it actually gives the player the freedom to explore the world. I can go into a higher level zone, probably get killed, but I can go do it and not feel like the enemy is actually unkillable, and there's actual proper progression that I can feel actually strong, which is again my biggest complaint. Giving player power is something that almost never happens in modern RPG games, and of course in this game they actually have done that really well and balanced it pretty well. I started off as a spellcaster struggling to kill, I believe they were drowners, completely using my entire mana bar and potions just to kill one of them, and by the time I explored the world, ran into a few bandit camps and picked up a few individual spells, I went back there and now I'm absolutely mollywhopping them, one-shotting them and destroying them in no time at all. And that is something that is missing from the current like modern day where players are strong, everything scales to you, you feel weak. I hate it. This game doesn't do that, and that's been extremely refreshing. And this is kind of why I was saying this feels like the more classic Skyrim RPG. The world is handcrafted, not everything is pointed out to you, and your character actually feels progression and gets stronger. And this, and coupled with the fact that they have a pretty good passive tree and skill tree, you know, it makes the game feel like a classic RPG, kind of the direction I would have hoped that the RPG genre kind of pushed towards, rather than the big beam of legendary light going down and explaining everything to you. Anyway, that is the breakdown of the open world. If you never really played it, or the core gameplay a little bit, if you never played Tainted Grail, your classic RPG dark fantasy world that I think the devs have done a really good job at. So what else should we expect in the 0.9 update? Well, another thing is, if you're a regular watcher of the channel, you know I'm not a big story person. I don't care about stories. However, from what I can tell, the game has really in-depth storytelling, good voice acting, as I said a second ago. I'm about 15 hours into the game, 15 to like 18 hours, give or take. Prologue and the Act 1, which I have a lot of gameplay left in, is looking like it offers a pretty good amount of playtime, and according to the dev team, Act 1 should take you around 20 hours to complete, which seems to align with my current playtime. So if I do all the side quests and the things of the sort, explore, get my house in together, which we're going to talk about in a second, it does look like it aligns with what they have, so there's quite a bit of content. In the coming months, we should see 2 more acts. They've been pretty heavily advertising Act 3 over on their Twitter. I highly recommend you go check it out so you have a better idea of what I'm talking about. But yeah, a lot of content seems to be coming in the game. From what I can tell as well, the update is also refining the skill tree. That's my kind of game. That's what I do. I love making builds. And this is where Tainted Grail differs heavily, in my opinion, from like the Skyrim titles, and I would even argue improves on the formula. It adds a massive passive tree, giving the players the freedom to build their character in the way that they kind of want. And obviously for me, that's pretty big. So there's multiple branches that you can take while you're building your character. Obviously, as a spellcaster, I went down the spirituality branch, focusing heavily on magic, mana, things of I was doing like a mana stacker, and it transfers into like heavy like health and stuff like that. And then I did perception, because perception heavily focuses on crit. So I was a spellcaster that was dealing some high crit damage, as you could probably tell, just blowing everything up. It is a pretty big skill tree, I would say, for RPG standards, but nothing too complicated. I think it's pretty easy to kind of understand. And I ran into a couple of reset potions in my playtime, so it seems pretty easy to reset, even if you did somehow make a mistake or you want to maybe change your build up a little bit. So it wasn't too inconvenient. A lot of the character sheet stats and stuff like that comes purely from a passive standpoint. Obviously, you're going to need to go out into the open world and add to it to make it a lot better and make it, you know, more specialized. That's where the crafting system come into play, because as you explore in the open world, you'll find books and different materials that can give you crafting recipes, so you can create your own personalized set of gear. And this gear can be upgraded, like raw stats upgraded, and even customized with sockets and runes. And this allows you to kind of fine tune your character to make your character more tailored to what you want your playstyle. Again, I haven't played Tainted Grail before, so this is all brand new to me. Just want to give you guys a better understanding of what to expect from the game, because you know me, I love making builds, I love character customization. That's always going to stand out to me above everything else. And then adding the dark fantasy of a Skyrim like world, is hitting kind of the notes that I like as a player. It's pretty impressive. For a little bit more open world and general elements beyond the classic RPG open world exploration, which includes quite a few dungeons, which I believe I've explored about 9, give or take. There's still a ton of like raw side quests I need to complete and exploration that I haven't done just yet. Each of the dungeons felt pretty unique, and they all had like mini bosses. Not all of them, but some of them had mini bosses that had different like loot, gear, things of the sort, which was good. Of course, we talked about crafting, but there are a handful of other features. For example, there's fishing, which I had to do a mission for. So if you are into fishing, I'm not into fishing, but that is available. There's sketching. I didn't run into this mechanic, and if you're wondering why, this game doesn't necessarily point it out to you. Obviously, there's going to be something like there's treasure hunting, of course, so they'll point out a map or something, give you a general idea, things like that. But for the most part, everything lets the player kind of explore it, so that's why I probably didn't run into it just yet. There's housing, yes, full-fledged housing and decorating. I did run into the decorating part, so like finding furniture and things of the sort. I didn't see the actual housing part yet. I will try to explore that in the next coming days. Crafting, of course, this is a big one. There's also alchemy, which is a nice system for creating potions and different types of food. Theft is an option. I'm gonna steal either way, it doesn't even matter. Mining, there's gonna be horse riding. I do have a horse. I've been using it a little bit, though I prefer to run around, just kind of see the world. Magic, of course, this is my primary damage dealing type. There's 4 schools. I'm using the fire school, but yeah, there is some like summoning, other abilities, stuff like that. You can actually play a full-fledged summoner build, which is cool. And with the 1.0 update, I'm expecting even more features because, again, the team said that they're going to be adding much more. And even the fact that the developers are even considering adding more based on the activities already got, I'm pretty impressed, honestly. This team is just killing it right now. With that in mind, you guys know how I do it here. I'm always going to offer the good as well as the bad. The game is in early access, so keep in mind, I'm not going to call it bad. It needs to iron out a handful of things, but yeah, let's talk about it. I want to see these possible changes before or during the 1.0 update. I think will actually improve the overall gameplay for most players, especially for me. So there's 2 major things we need to talk about: quality of life and performance. We're going to talk about performance first. There's 2 things in the performance that need to be looked at. First off, the autosave stutter. Whenever the game autosaves, there is a stutter here and there that needs some attention. I know it'll probably get patched in the bug fixes. I know they were looking to improve this before the 1.0 update. That's as far as it goes to performance. That's the only thing that actually stutters my game. The game itself runs good, but autosave stutter, that needs to be looked at. And then of course the crashes. I have crashed probably about 5 or so times in my 20 or so hours of playtime. It's not a big deal. I've crashed more in Monster Hunter Wilds, if I'm being honest, but I would like to see that be kind of patched out before the 1.0 update. Besides that, as I said, performance is running really solid overall, but need to get on top of those 2 things before the 1.0 update, because I don't want any players losing progress or anything like that. The other thing was quality of life improvements. This isn't like make or break or anything. I would like to see it because I think this is going to be really good to make the player feel a lot better. But you do have a stash, as you probably come to expect, where you can put all your items and goods in. And I'd love to see a put all take all thing, or at the very least, if not possible, add some type of alphabetical sorting or a search feature, because some quest does require you to grab different reagents and stuff, and being able to actively just not have to search through a long list of items would really help the player experience. Like I said, I can live with or without this, but ideally if this was added, I think it would improve the game pretty drastically. So just for me personally. And then being able to craft your items directly from your chest would be nice too. Again, this one is not make or break, but it would make the game feel a lot better. Overall, that's kind of my thoughts on the negative, I guess you would argue, which isn't bad. It's just clean up performance and maybe a little bit of quality of life. This stuff can easily be addressed in the 1.0 update, and I know they're already making plans for it, but still pretty good for early access game in my opinion. So what are my closing and final thoughts on the Tainted Grail 0.9 update? First off, I'm very happy that I was able to jump into the update and try Tainted Grail out for the actual first time, not just watch it. Massively happy about that. From what I can tell, the most impactful part of this update is fleshing out a lot of the core systems and making combat feel way more fluid and enjoyable, especially for my melee chads. I haven't talked much about the melee because, again, I played a spellcaster, but again, from what I've seen, the melee combat in the past has improved significantly. The core gameplay loop feels good. I don't think nothing needs to be changed about that. It has a familiar your story that is told really well. I love the voice acting. I know I didn't get to mention this, but the voice acting felt good and the music felt good as well. So, you know, really happy about that. 20 hours of Act 1 and roughly 2 hours prologue. That's pretty impressive considering we still have 2 more acts to go. And the build diversity and character customization, chef's kiss, of course, love that in any game. My overall impressions of the 0.9 update is extremely positive. I'm going to be following this game pretty closely, and ideally when the 1.0 update drops, I'd love to get my hands on that early as well, like I did with the 0.9 update if possible. Dark fantasy RPGs are something the gaming world has been missing for a very long time, and I think Tainted Grail is going to fill that void. Small indie team, but boy, they're pretty talented, so I'm really happy about it. With that said, that's my general breakdown of the update and review of the 0.9 update, or whatever you want to call it. Let me know down in the comments what you think about Tainted Grail. I have a direct Steam link in the description whenever the update goes live, so you can go ahead and check it out if you want to possibly purchase it yourself. Huge shout out to Awaken Realms for sponsoring and giving me a hands-on look early of the 0.9 update. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one very soon.